Hi, I recently received my monthly books from my shop, Phantom of the Attic in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Uh, Jeff and his team do a great job. And from them, I order what's available in previews. So, regardless of publisher, I like to get it through them to help support them. They're a great store, and we need these great independent stores to keep on going. And with the exception of a couple of books, this was mostly Marvel and DC. And yeah, I'm not one to say that I really don't care for much of what Marvel's creating. Um, but there's a saying that I'm reminded of by Miles Davis, where he said that good music is good music, no matter where it comes from. And there are some books that I do find entertaining from the big two. So the first one is Nightwing. This is issue 105. I actually got issue 104, but and then having the stack here. But this continues Tom Taylor's run. I think this is the 28th issue that he's been on. And I started with this on the beginning of his run in issue 78. And Tom Taylor's probably one of the top two or three writers working for the big two. He's actually exclusive to DC now. His books, at a minimum, are good and entertaining, and at their best, they're great. And there's other books that he writes. I'm just focusing on this series. And this series also introduced the artist Bruno Redondo. And I'm pointing out this comic because this is drawn by Bruno Redondo, who used to do the monthly work and then started doing it every other issue. And now he's doing covers and he's doing other books. So the artist they have that fills in is pretty good. But Redondo has a certain style and great layout. So the gimmick with this issue is that this is drawn completely from the perspective of Nightwing. So basically it's like a video game where you are Nightwing. So I got the cover here. He's about to put his mask on and he's looking at the city and he wakes up. Him and Barbara Gordon in Canada are finally dating. And he's waking up and then their dog comes in, starts laughing. And everything is done through his eyes. So like if you see him, you only see him because he's like a reflection in the mirror. And there's just some really wonderful, I guess, video game like scenes where like they jump out the window and this is where like they go through the city and this is kind of like how it would look from his eyes. Usually you would have the shot like showing the hero and action, but to have this kind of thing like from their eyes is a really cool perspective, and Redondo is great with layouts. So this is an interesting story. It continues the adventures of them being in Bloodhaven, where the Titans are now located. Great art, great coloring, great writing, just fun superhero stories that are well written, aren't too verbose. The art isn't that super over dramatic style that you see a lot in Marvel. Like this scene, they're gonna crash into this office building, so this is why you see him in the reflection. There's like the moments before impact, and then here you have them coming through. So this is a fun issue. If you're looking for a good superhero book, I would recommend Nightwing. I think they've all been collected in trades. And what I like with Tom Taylor is that he's dropped a lot of seeds. This villain first appeared in the first issue of the run, and you didn't realize that he would be a relevant character for maybe 20 issues. So there's a lot of long-term planning with how this is going to work. So this is actually a good book. I've recommended it to people who like superheroes or just interested in an entertaining comic. And to me, it has not lost any speed. The best issues are the ones drawn by Bruno Redondo, just because his layouts and his art are just really great. Very clean. Reminds me a little bit of like Paul Smith, where you have a lot going on, but it's very clean. It's not too cluttered, like a lot of artists these days do. So it's good stuff. And to stay with the Tom Taylor theme, in May, Titans #1 was launched. He's also writing this. The books don't so much intersect with Nightwing. Like the end of this issue of Nightwing says, see continue to Titans #1. I really don't know why, because I read Titans #1. It really didn't have to further the story. I guess it's just marketing. But it's not a bad story. just so anybody knows, basically after this big cataclysmic event, the Justice League are basically disbanded, and they've asked the Titans to kind of like do the job of protecting the planet. And Dick Grayson has been basically said, okay, you're in charge. I mean, Superman, Wonder Woman, and Batman are around, but they were like, you know what, we kind of have to, like, you know, recover from this events, and you know, we want. I think you guys are ready now to go. So this is a pretty good book. They developed the characters well. I'm glad that they finally have settled on a team. They're at the forefront. Not to spoil too much, but there is some large event here, and all of a sudden you have like the Peacemaker shows up. So it's one of those things where like they know they're working in a wider superhero world. Of course, Peacemaker has its own TV show on Max, so there's a tie-in there. But it's interesting that, you know, I like that dynamic where they're supposed to both be good guys, but they're serving different agendas. And then issue 2 furthers the story. So this is, so far so good. I'm enjoying this. We'll see how it goes, but I said Tom Taylor's writing it, and I've said earlier, Tom Taylor really doesn't disappoint. Okay. Next are 2 issues of the Planet of the Apes. This is the first comic books that are published on the 20th Century Fox Studios banner. The original advertisement showed scenes that you would have seen from like the original films from the 60s and the 70s. But the story actually takes place in the reboot universe from the movies that we've had for the last 10 years. These are stories that occur in that universe. They're not, they don't feature those characters. They feature new characters. They kind of fill in the blanks. It's sort of that thing where they're kind of like working in between the movies or before the movies. And the reason I got this book is, first of all, I've always liked the Planet of the Apes franchise. But the writing team, the writer is David F. Walker. This is the team. And the artist is Dave Wachter. And I've always been a big fan of Dave Wachter ever since I saw his art in Godzilla and Hell #5. And then he had a long run in Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles by IDW. So basically, if you're not familiar with this timelines, and this is consistent with the movies, is that a pharmaceutical firm is working on a medicine to eradicate Alzheimer's. And they tested on apes, and what they found was that besides reversing Alzheimer's, it was making the apes intelligent. However, what they created basically a pandemic, a virus that is killing about 90% of humanity. So since it was tested on apes, there's conspiracy theories that the apes are the carriers, which they're not. And it's funny because this whole idea came out maybe 10 years ago, and it kind of like really imitates reality. So basically, you have the UN their medical research wing is trying to protect as many apes as possible. They figure, look, if we can figure out this virus, we can even come up with a cure for it. So we have to keep the apes alive so that because they can carry the virus, they're not sickened by it, but maybe we can figure out what's going on. But then there's this whole group of humans that are saying that they're being called by God to eradicate all the apes. So based on that framework, you have basically 3 stories that go on and at different times. So it's really interesting because I read the first issue and they kind of like told the story, but then in the second and third issue, they branched off to 2 other stories that are different times, different characters. They're all new characters. One is part of that UN peacekeeping force. One is an ape that is starting to like lead the rebellion. And then another one is kind of like a story in between. So it's different. I like it. It's sometimes almost too believable, because you would think that, yes, humans would create a paramilitary group and they would try to eradicate everything they thought based on misinformation. But it's a good series. I hope it continues. I don't know what the sales are, but the art's good here. I'm just going to show issue 2 because I think issue 2's been out for like a month or so. So you know, so you have we have series where they're talking. It's almost like Walking Dead, where you have, if Walking Dead had different, like, points of story at different times going on, but they're filling in a lot of information. So I find this pretty good. I'm very happy with it so far. I can recommend this as well. One issue that I don't have the issue with me, because I gave it to my son to read because I finished it, is Void Rivals. So I just printed the cover. Now, Void Rivals is now in its second printing, and the gimmick or the hook with this book is that nobody knew, but this is the first book of the Robert Kirkman Energon universe, which is going to include G.I. Joe and Transformers, which Kirkman has bought the rights to from Hasbro, or they acquired the rights, let's say. So they're no longer being published by IDW. A lot of fans were mixed on the IDW runs. So this kind of snuck up on everybody, and the portion where you see that really relates to the Transformers isn't until like 2/3 of the way through. And the reason I'm mentioning is that I'm not spoiling anything because this is already going to second print, and the second print covers have Transformers on the cover. So everybody knows, but you know, Robert Kirkman is great at keeping things secret and surprising people with stuff. And what I liked about this was that it gives you enough to be interested, but it doesn't give you too much, so it kind of keeps you hungry. It's just enough, and it's interesting, and they open up enough things where it's not all over the place, but it's enough to keep you hooked, like to find out like what else is going on. And this isn't really so much, I mean, it's a vehicle to launch the Transformers and I guess eventually the G.I. Joe, but there's a story here of the two races that are here that's their story. So to me, it's almost like this really didn't need to be, this couldn't be on its own. It doesn't need, it's not like they're not so much a vehicle for the Transformers to play off of, but they're there. Interesting book. Kirkman knows how to write to give you enough but not too much, keeps things moving brisk but not too brisk. You know, Kirkman is rich. He's sort of like Mark Miller, where these are two guys that are rich, except that and you know, people say that they both are two guys that are looking for movie and TV franchises. I think that a lot of that ship has sailed. Netflix and other streaming services are not paying money out the door, throwing money out the door to fund these kind of things anymore. So, you know, Kirkman just making comics because he wants to make comics. I mean, obviously he wants to make money, but he doesn't have to. He's already rich. And Walking Dead is like evergreen, is an evergreen. They're just going to keep making money for him. So this is going to second print. It's going to be out mid-July. It's a good story. I recommend this. Now, from Marvel, this is Ultimate Invasion. So this is written by Jonathan Hickman and drawn by Brian Hitch. Brian Hitch is the original artist of the Ultimates comics. And, you know, Jonathan Hickman, he just recently had his X-Men run that ended sooner than anybody expected. And it's a good book, but it's like if you do a compare and contrast between Void Rivals and Ultimate Invasion, is that Void Rivals gives you enough to keep you interested, but not too much to slow things down. And the only thing that I have with Hickman as a writer is that I think he comes with some great stories. The dialogue is good, but sometimes he just has to like make things, to me, longer than they need to be. So maybe because he got extra pages in this book, it seems like some scenes could have been briefer, but again, They have a lot of extra pages, $8.99 comics, so it's almost like double the size of a regular comic. So maybe he had to like really extend this one, or kind of wanted to drop a lot in. But at times there's a lot of dialogue, and it's not like Chris Claremont dialogue where it's like so much that it's like a Russian novel, but it's very wordy for me, for my taste. The art is good. Brian Hitch, still a great artist. The story moves along, but it has that Jonathan Hickman slow pace. And the whole hook with this book is that the Reed Richards from the Ultimate Universe, the maker, has been freed from his prison and wants to recreate the Ultimate Universe. Now, one little piece that I did like was he actually comes into contact with Miles Morales, because Miles Morales and the maker are the only survivors of that universe. But it's not, I mean, you know what he wants to do eventually. How he's going to do it or what he's doing is sort of unclear. So I got this because it's a 4-issue miniseries. I figure if I liked it, I could buy the eventual spin-off book they'll do. If I don't, then it's just 4 issues. But a lot of this is Hickman just drawing things out, like I said, a little longer than I think he needs to be. It has a few pages at the end of some of the original art. Scans the original art by Brian Hitch. It's not bad. But I'll definitely get the 4-issue miniseries. And lastly, from Two Morals Publisher, I got Destroyer Duck, the Graphite edition. And I was actually made aware of this by my friend Colin from the Loading the Canon channel, on YouTube, and also the publisher of Canon, the comics magazine. And I would recommend that you get a copy of Canon, the comics magazine, because overall it's good. And I'm not saying that because I have a 3-page article about Barry Windsor Smith, but aside from that, you may want to check it out. I think it's really good. So apparently what happened, though, was that in the late 70s, early 80s, Kirby became aware that certain inkers were like erasing his work. Vinnie Coletta comes to mind. And so he did photocopies of all his work, so he would know what it looked like before it left. And and this is why we have called Graphite, because it's the pencil pages. But the whole story with this is that in real life, Steve Gerber created Howard the Duck, and he wanted to retain the ownership of Howard the Duck, and Marvel said no. So Marvel did what any large company does. They sent a ton of attorneys after him. He had an attorney, but the legal bills were piling up, so he came with the idea of doing a benefit comic. And the benefit comic would be Destroyer Duck, but then it would also have other stories. So they got, and a benefit comic, for those of you who don't know, is people lend their work, whether it be art, story, prose, and they donate it to a creator or a publisher, and then they put the comic together, it sells, and then all the profits go to some sort of fund, and usually a legal fund. This is not the first time this has happened. So they actually approached Jack Kirby and said, hey, could you do the first issue? And Kirby, who's someone who spent years battling Marvel to get ownership rights to the works that he created, and even his original art, jumped at the chance and did the first 6 issues. I think it ended with issue 8. Gerber and Marvel came to a settlement. So this has some great essays and introductions about how this book came to be, the whole timeline. Mark Evanier also writes in here. They have like the script for issue 1. So if you've ever wanted to see how a comic script, like a prototype for at least one from early 80s, this is it. And then this is just the pencils. And I think they have them for all issues except for the last one. And they said that if you ever see anything that doesn't look just like pencils like here, they couldn't get the original scans. So what they did was they took scans of the original inked work, and the inker was Alfredo Acala, who's a inker that I enjoyed a lot in the 70s and 80s. So this is kind of more of a piece of history. Even though Steve Gerber wrote it, it's got that Kirby craziness, but not too much. But it's good, it's fun, and it's kind of like a piece of history. This is from Two Morals Publishing. You can get this anywhere, from any comic shop they can order for you. I'm sure you can get it at a bookstore as well. So that's really it. You know, Marvel and DC can come up with good titles when they really want to. I just think that most of the talent that you have in comics is on the independent comics these days. Also, when you're an independent comic, you're more free to do whatever you want. But with Marvel and DC, you gotta walk this little tightrope between what you can do, but you can't change it too much. You have to get approvals from a lot of people. Does it have to be tie into the movies and all that? So, and also, I'm pretty sure that with these books, especially Nightwing, it's become very popular. It's funny, it always happens where a book that nobody really thinking about, the creators left alone to do what they want to do, and then when it starts getting popular and selling well, all of a sudden everybody wants to get their hands on it because they want to like get some of the credit for making it great. And with the independents, I don't think you have that very much. But so far, this book has been consistent. All these books, you know, have been consistent. Hopefully they stay around. And that's it. Hope you enjoyed this. Thanks.